I never expected my life to change the way it did the winter of 2004. I was 15, a sophomore, and still raw from my parents' divorce. My mom stayed behind in Chicago, but I ended up in Duluth, Minnesota, with my dad, who was doing his best to hold himself together. We rented this little gray house on the edge of town, where snow piled high against the windows and silence filled every room after dark. I was the quiet type. Always had been. The kind of girl who kept her head down in school, filled sketchbooks with drawings of faces I'd never show anyone, and hoped people would pass me by. My plan when we moved was simple. Don't get noticed. Don't get dragged into drama, and maybe survive high school with a decent GPA and a few drawings I was proud of. But then there was Ethan Cole. He wasn't just popular, he was untouchable. Captain of the basketball team, top grades, the kind of boy teachers used as an example of what every student should be. Even his friends seemed to orbit him, laughing too hard at his jokes, eager for scraps of attention. He walked through the hallways like he owned them, and nobody questioned it. The first time he spoke to me, I was sketching in class, pretending to take notes. He leaned down, his shadow falling across my desk, and whispered, "Want to grab lunch with me?" My stomach flipped so hard I thought I might pass out. I remember nodding, my face hot, and thinking there was no way this was real. It felt like stepping into a dream. He gave me nicknames, little gifts like a mixtape or a flower tucked into my locker. At night, we'd sit at the frozen lake, watching stars that looked sharper in the cold air. For once, I wasn't invisible. Someone saw me. And not just anyone. Him. I let myself believe it was perfect, even though something inside me whispered it wasn't. His eyes lingered too long when I laughed with other boys. He dodged questions about his family, never once inviting me over. I told myself it was normal. I told myself he was just private. But deep down, I knew something was off. It was small things at first. Ethan would go days without calling, then show up outside my house with a smile and an apology, acting like nothing had happened. He'd get jealous if I mentioned another boy, even in passing. If I pushed back, his voice hardened in a way that made me feel stupid for questioning him. The biggest thing was his house. No one seemed to know where it was. Whenever I asked, he brushed me off, said his parents were out of town, or the place was a mess, or they were doing renovations. After a while, it became a running joke between us, except it didn't feel like a joke. One afternoon, while decorating the gym for the winter dance, I found myself stapling paper snowflakes to the bleachers with Caleb Hines. Caleb was quiet, almost invisible, the kind of kid people whispered about but never really knew. He always had a notebook with him, his head down, scribbling. Out of nowhere, I blurted, "Sometimes I don't think I really know Ethan." Caleb looked up, his eyes uneasy. "Funny thing," he said, voice low. "Nobody knows where Ethan lives." It stuck with me. That night, when Ethan and I were walking home, I asked again, "Why don't you ever take me to your place?" His face tightened. "You don't trust me?" "That's not it. You think I'm lying to you?" His tone was sharp, defensive. My chest went cold. We argued, voices rising in the snowy street until I stormed off. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, heart racing. Out of the shadows came Caleb, panting, eyes wide. "Rachel, you can't trust him," he said, pointing down the street. And then Ethan appeared, calm, collected, his breath puffing in the cold. Caleb's voice cracked. "He's not who you think he is. He's killed people. I can prove it." Ethan laughed. Not a nervous laugh, but cold, sharp. "Jealousy's ugly, Caleb." Before I could react, Ethan shoved him down into the snow, pinning him like it was effortless. I froze, my body refusing to move, the world tilting as I watched Ethan's perfect mask slip into something darker. The next morning, Caleb was gone. His locker was empty, his number disconnected, and teachers said he transferred schools overnight. I knew that was impossible. You don't just disappear like that without warning. My gut screamed something was wrong. When I asked Ethan about it, he smiled and said Caleb had problems that he'd been planning to leave anyway. His calmness made me feel crazy, like maybe I'd imagined it all. But I hadn't. I couldn't forget the terror in Caleb's eyes. For the first time, I wondered if I was in danger. 2 days later, Ethan finally invited me to his house. My nerves tangled into knots, but I went. It was a pale yellow place on the edge of town, snow piled against the porch. Inside, it smelled faintly of chemicals. His parents weren't there, apparently traveling again. We ended up in his room, neat to the point of obsession. Everything in its place, nothing out of order. My gaze caught on the heavy wooden box beneath his bed. Before I could ask, he pulled it out like he'd been waiting. When he opened it, my stomach turned. Inside were jars, dozens of them, filled with preserved organs. Hearts, each one carefully labeled with names. My hands shook as I spotted one with a tattooed scrap of skin floating inside. A small star, the same star I'd had inked on my hip months ago. I staggered back, choking on air. "What is this?" Ethan's voice was soft, almost soothing. "The stalker left them. He's trying to scare us, but don't worry, I'll protect you." He said it like he believed it, like he thought this was normal. I laughed weakly, forcing myself to nod. "Of course, I believe you." But inside, I knew. He wasn't protecting me. He was the danger. That night he walked me home. His hand brushed mine, his voice light, like nothing had changed. He told me about practice, about classes, as if the box didn't exist. I forced myself to smile, to answer, to act like everything was fine. Inside, I was screaming. I couldn't show fear. If I did, I was sure I wouldn't make it home. Lying in bed, I replayed everything. The way Caleb vanished. The jars, the star. I wanted to call the police, to tell my dad, to scream it from the rooftops. But who would believe me? Ethan was perfect. He was the golden boy. People adored him. And Caleb, the one person who tried to warn me, was already gone. The next week, Ethan kept things normal. Dates, small gifts, sweet smiles. But his eyes lingered too long, studying me like he was memorizing every reaction. I learned to hide my fear behind shaky laughs. I started planning quietly. I packed a small bag under my bed with money, clothes, and my sketchbook. I told my dad I wanted to visit Mom soon. I made sure Ethan never suspected. Every time he walked me home, I felt the weight of his hand on my back like a leash. I wondered how many others had laughed, nodded, pretended, until their names ended up on jars. I wasn't going to be one of them. I never told him I was leaving. One morning while he was at practice, I slipped away. My dad thought I was heading to school. Instead, I got on a bus to Chicago with nothing but my small bag and my sketchbook. I never said goodbye. I don't know what became of Ethan Cole. Maybe he kept walking those halls, smiling, charming, collecting trophies no one else ever saw. Maybe he slipped up, maybe he didn't. Sometimes I search his name online, but nothing comes up. Clean record, perfect image, just like before. But I'll never forget the weight of that box, the way he looked at me when Caleb screamed the truth, the calmness in his voice when he swore he'd protect me from himself. I live differently now. Locks on the doors, pepper spray in my bag, always watching shadows. I still draw, but the faces in my sketchbook aren't imagined anymore. They're memories. The scariest part isn't that Ethan existed. It's that nobody else saw it. Nobody wanted to. People like him hide in plain sight. And people like me, quiet, invisible, make the perfect prey. I survived, but I know I carry his mark forever. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles at you, takes you to stargaze, and makes you feel special. Don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts, even when the world insists you're wrong. And never ever confuse attention for love, because the person who claims they'll protect you might be the very one you need protection from. The summer of 2015 was supposed to be my fresh start. I was 25, finally done with school, and had managed to land a full-time job at a small gallery in Baltimore. It wasn't glamorous. Most of the time I was cataloging donations, prepping wine for late showings, or sweeping floors after events. But it felt like the first step toward the life I wanted. The paycheck wasn't much, though, and after rent I barely had enough left over for groceries. The apartment I found was exactly what you'd expect for the price. An old-century building with thin walls, leaky pipes, and wallpaper that peeled no matter how much tape I pressed down. It smelled faintly of mildew, like the bones of the place were rotting. But it was mine, and that counted for something. Still, the numbers didn't add up. I needed a roommate, so I posted an ad online. Roommate wanted, clean, responsible, artistic preferred, 450 MO plus utilities. A week later, I got a message from a woman named Lena Hart. She said she had just moved from Philadelphia and was planning to attend MICA. Her emails were polite, almost formal, like she'd rehearsed them. She showed up to the interview with a small suitcase, pressed jeans, and a soft gray sweater. Her answers were neat, her voice calm. She asked to see the kitchen, nodded when I pointed out the bathroom, and offered her half of the deposit in cash right away. Something about her felt rehearsed, but I told myself I was just overthinking. She seemed reliable, and I couldn't afford to be picky. For the first month, it was easy. Lena paid her share on time, kept her room neat, and barely spoke beyond a quiet morning. I was working late most nights, dragging myself home past midnight, so I appreciated the low-drama arrangement. She was almost invisible, and I thought maybe I'd lucked out. It wasn't until October that I realized how wrong I was. The first thing that bothered me was the mail. Envelopes kept showing up addressed to names I didn't recognize. Half a dozen of them, all different. At first, I thought it was a mix-up, but Lena always grabbed them before I could check. When I asked, she just said, "Old tenants, I'll handle it." Then there were the nights. I'd get home from a gallery event at 2 in the morning and hear the door click shut, like she was leaving just as I arrived. Sometimes at dawn, I'd hear her come back, footsteps soft but steady. When I finally asked where she was going, she tilted her head slightly, like the question amused her. "Out," she said. Nothing more. I brushed it off until the night I woke up with the sense of being watched. My bedroom door was cracked, the blinds letting in a pale stripe of moonlight. In the corner, Lena sat in a chair I didn't remember moving, her face still, her eyes locked on me. "Lena?" My voice shook. She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. She just sat there, motionless, until after what felt like hours, she stood up, walked out, and gently closed the door behind her. I couldn't move. My body stayed frozen until sunlight spilled through the window. By morning, I convinced myself I had imagined it, that maybe I'd been dreaming. But deep down, I knew it was real. From then on, the apartment felt different. Some mornings I'd find the front door unlocked, though I was certain I'd bolted it. My phone rang once at work. Caller ID showed it was my own landline. I answered, and all I heard was breathing, soft and steady, before the line went dead. Something was wrong with Lena. I just didn't know what. One Saturday, I worked up the courage to confront her. I knocked on her door, forcing my voice to sound steady. "We need to talk about boundaries. Last night was not okay." Silence. I tried again. "Lena, are you listening?" No response. Finally, I pushed the door open. What I saw made my stomach clench. The room was bare. No clothes, no toiletries, no books. Just a mattress on the floor and a single plastic bag in the corner. I hesitated, then crouched down and opened it. Inside were forged IDs under different names, a burner phone, and scraps of paper covered in scribbles. Some were random shapes, some letters I couldn't decipher. But one phrase repeated over and over in shaky handwriting. "She doesn't know yet." I dropped the bag like it burned me. My first thought was to run, but I forced myself back to my room and locked the door. My hands shook so badly I couldn't even hold my pencil straight when I tried to draw. The next morning she was gone. Her mattress was stripped, the bag missing, the room completely empty. It was as if she had never lived there at all. I called the police. They came, asked a few questions, and ran the name Lena Hart. Nothing. No record, no enrollment at the art school, no ID history. The officer shrugged and said, "Looks like she gave you fake documents. Happens more than you'd think." But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some scammer looking for cheap rent. The way she stared at me, the way she slipped out at night, the repeated words, "She doesn't know yet." What didn't I know? I broke my lease a week later and moved in with a coworker. I told myself I was overreacting, but every time I tried to sleep, I pictured her in the corner of my room, eyes blank, face pale in the moonlight. Nights were restless. Sometimes I'd dream of footsteps in the hall or wake to the sound of the front door unlocking, only to find myself alone. My coworker told me to let it go, that I'd dodged a bullet, but I couldn't stop replaying the little details, the fake IDs, the envelopes, the way she'd always been one step ahead of me. I tried to convince myself she was hiding from someone. Maybe she'd been running from debt collectors, or family, or worse. But then I'd remember the phrase written again and again on those scraps of paper. She doesn't know yet. Did it mean me? Did it mean there was something she planned to do that I wasn't supposed to see until it was too late? Months passed. I settled into my new place, focused on work, tried to rebuild my routine. But sometimes, walking home, I'd feel eyes on me. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps behind me and whip around to find nothing. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it wasn't. It's been years now, but I still tell the story. Over drinks at parties, people ask about the weirdest roommate I ever had, and I always say Lena. I describe the night she sat silently in my room, the emptiness of her life, the bag full of IDs, the notes. Everyone reacts the same way. Nervous laughter, then a shiver. Someone always says, she was practicing, watching, preparing. I don't disagree. The part I don't always share is what stuck with me the most. One of the scraps of paper had a phrase half erased, the ink smudged but still legible. It read, "When she's ready, I'll come back." Sometimes I lie awake wondering if she meant me. If all those nights of silence, all those blank stares were rehearsals for something I narrowly escaped. And if maybe, just maybe, I haven't really escaped at all. What I learned is this: trust the unease. When someone's story doesn't add up, when the details don't fit, listen to that voice in your gut. We want to believe the best in people, especially when we need them. But sometimes the danger isn't a stranger in the alley. Sometimes it's the person who shares your kitchen, who says good morning, who smiles politely, and watches you when you sleep. I don't usually talk about the darker parts of my life, but when I look back, I realize they shaped me more than anything else. Long before I had the language to explain it, I always felt different. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, in a small rental house with peeling paint and a front porch that creaked when you walked on it, I learned to keep quiet. My dad left when I was little. My mom worked double shifts at the hospital. My older brother disappeared most nights with friends, and that left me with books, my journal, and a steady hum of late-night TV. I was 14 the winter it happened. 14, and just starting to recognize that the way I looked at girls wasn't the same as how other kids did. I hadn't told anyone yet. I was shy, awkward, and more naive than I'd ever admit. That's when I met Samantha Hale. It was a cold evening at the local library. I remember the smell of dust and the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I was sitting at a corner table with a stack of books when she walked up and looked right at me. Her skin was pale, her dark hair pulled tight, and her eyes had this strange intensity like she could see through me. Without hesitation, she asked, "Do you want to be my girlfriend?" I froze. No one had ever spoken to me like that. My cheeks burned, my heart raced, and before I even thought about it, I nodded. Part of me was terrified, but another part felt like someone had finally noticed me. At first, it was exciting. We had secret meetings at the park, late-night calls whispered under blankets. For once, I felt like I belonged to something bigger than myself. I told myself that whatever little unease I felt didn't matter. She was my first love, and I convinced myself that girls couldn't hurt each other the way men did. But I was wrong. The first time she slapped me, it was at a bus stop in broad daylight. My face stung, but what cut deeper was how every adult nearby turned away, pretending they didn't see. That silence made me realize I couldn't count on anyone to protect me. Still, I stayed. I told myself it was love. I told myself it would get better. But with each passing week, Samantha's grip on me only grew tighter. By the second month, Samantha wasn't just controlling, she was cruel. She dictated what I wore, who I talked to, even how quickly I answered her texts. If I hesitated, her voice would turn sharp, her hands even sharper. Once, she cornered me behind the gym and whispered that if I didn't give her what she wanted, she would make me disappear forever. I was 14, too naive to fully understand, but old enough to feel fear crawl down my spine. I kept her secret. At home, I shut my bedroom door and cried into my pillow. At school, my grades slid and friends drifted. My mom thought I was just being a moody teenager. She had no idea that the girl I'd fallen for was slowly destroying me from the inside out. One night, after she caught me laughing at a joke another classmate made, she pulled a broken bottle from her bag and held it up to my throat. Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice was low and cold when she said, "You belong to me. If you ever walk away, I'll kill you." The next morning, something in me broke. My voice shook as I told her in the hallway, "We're done. Don't call me. Don't come near me." She just smiled, like she already knew I wouldn't be able to escape. For the first time, I told my mom everything. We went to the school. I told teachers, friends, even the police. The response was a nightmare. Her family said I was lying. My classmates whispered that I was being dramatic. An officer told us there wasn't enough evidence for charges. I remember sitting in that cold office, my hands clenched, while Samantha sat across from me and whispered, "If you leave me, I will kill you." That was when my mom decided we had to leave. She pulled me out of school, packed our things, and moved us to another city. For months, I barely spoke. I went to therapy. Slowly, I learned how to breathe again. But the fear never left. And years later, when I thought I had escaped her for good, I learned that evil doesn't fade. It waits. In 2018, I returned to Portland for college. I was older, stronger, and more determined to live the life I'd almost lost. I enrolled in environmental science at a state university. The campus was alive with energy. Students sprawled across the quad, music drifting from dorm windows, the smell of coffee shops on every corner. For the first time, I felt almost normal. On my very first day, that illusion shattered. I was walking across campus, my bag heavy with books, when I froze. 100 feet away, standing perfectly still, was Samantha. She hadn't changed much. Same pale face, same unblinking stare. Our eyes met, and my chest tightened like a fist was closing around it. She didn't wave, didn't speak. She just watched. I told myself it was a coincidence, that maybe she had family nearby. But within weeks I realized it wasn't. She started appearing everywhere. The grocery store, the mall, even once at the zoo with a group of people who looked as empty as she did. They never spoke. They only watched. My phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. Sometimes it was silence, sometimes a message that said, "Who is this?" or just 30 seconds of breathing. I changed my number. It kept happening. I tried to tell friends. Some believed me, most didn't. "Maybe it's just your anxiety," one said. But I knew. I knew the weight of her gaze, the way she fed off my fear. For 6 years it went on. I learned to live with it. Self-defense classes, pepper spray in my pocket, neighbors keeping an eye out. I dated, but nothing lasted. Every relationship crumbled under the weight of my paranoia. The worst part wasn't what she did, it was what she didn't do. She never touched me again. She never even spoke. But by being there, by making me question every shadow, she stole my peace. By 2023, I was in graduate school, studying online to avoid leaving my apartment more than I had to. I told myself she was gone. I even heard she'd moved to Seattle. For the first time in years, I almost believed I was safe. Until the van. It was a Saturday in late spring when the illusion cracked again. I was walking out of a hardware store with my girlfriend, arms full of paint supplies, laughing about how terrible I was at DIY projects. For once, I wasn't afraid. That's when the red and black van screeched past. A glass jar flew out the window and shattered at our feet. The stench hit instantly, urine. My girlfriend gagged, grabbing my arm as the van sped away. I only caught a glimpse of the driver, a pale man with dead eyes I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. It was Samantha's reach. Maybe not her behind the wheel, but someone connected to her. Someone carrying her message. I reported it, of course. The police took notes, asked if I got the license plate. I hadn't. They shrugged. Without evidence, it was just another incident in a long line of incidents they couldn't do much about. That night, I barely slept. Every knock on the wall, every creak of the floorboards, I thought it was her. My girlfriend tried to reassure me, saying maybe it was just random, but she didn't know the way Samantha worked. She didn't know the way she could turn silence into a weapon. I started avoiding public places again. I made sure my neighbors knew to look out for strangers. I bought another lock for the door. But even with all that, the paranoia crept back like an old friend. Because here's the truth. Once someone takes your sense of safety, it's almost impossible to get it back. And when you know they're still out there, watching, waiting, you live in a constant state of half fear, half resignation. It wasn't just about me anymore. Now I had someone I cared about, someone I didn't want dragged into this. That's when I realized Samantha's game wasn't over. She wanted me to know she could still reach me no matter how much time had passed. And the worst part? She was right. Today, I'm 26. I live in a small apartment with extra locks on every door and a camera pointed at the hallway. I don't answer numbers I don't recognize. I keep pepper spray by the bed. My girlfriend has been patient, but I see the worry in her eyes every time I flinch at a sound outside. It's been months since I last saw Samantha. Maybe she really did move. Maybe she finally got bored. Or maybe she's still out there, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. Some nights, I dream about her. The unblinking eyes, the cold voice whispering threats only I could hear. Other nights I wake to silence so thick it feels like someone is standing in the room with me. People like Samantha don't just vanish. They leave scars you can't see. They take pieces of you little by little until you don't recognize yourself anymore. I try to remind myself that I'm not the same girl I was at 14. I'm stronger now. I've survived every attempt she made to break me. I've built a life, even if it's scarred. But deep down I know the truth. Evil doesn't always leave. Sometimes it just steps back into the crowd, waiting for another chance to remind you it's still there. Never ignore the red flags. No relationship, no friendship, no crush is worth losing your safety or your sense of self. If someone controls you, hurts you, or makes you feel small, it will only get worse. Walk away before the damage becomes permanent. And when people doubt you, don't doubt yourself. Your fear, your instincts are real. Listen to them. They might just save your life.